Good morning, everybody, and Happy New Year. Welcome to 2021 and a new episode of MedWell Unscripted. We are so excited. Emily and I have been chatting with our guest, Laura, behind the scenes here, and we can't wait to share with you today. So today's topic is New Year, New You, the CBD Miracle Oil. And I can't say enough, and I want to say some housekeeping. We are recording this, so if you are watching the replay, feel free to leave a comment or a question. We absolutely will get back to you. And for those of you that are live with us, we have our rock star Kayla in the chat answering questions and posting links so you don't miss anything. All right, so let's get started with our introduction. So my name is April, and we are with MedWell Health and Wellness, your MMJ specialist, and we have Emily Waxman, our Director of Community Outreach. Hey, Emily.
Hello, everyone. Again, a very happy, healthy 2021 to you all. I hope everyone's doing great. Again, my name is Emily Waxman. I'm the Director of Outreach here at MedWell Health and Wellness. And I have to say that I am just so thrilled to be able to welcome our guest, Laura Lagano, today. I've been looking forward to this episode for so long. And again, Laura, I cannot thank you enough for joining us this morning.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure, Emily and April, to be here with you. You're actually my first interview of 2021, and we know that 2021 is going to be a better year than 2020.
Yay. I agree with you.
So Laura Lagano, she's the author of the CBD Miracle Oil, and she also is like a rock star in the holistic wellness area industry. So I'm going to have Laura share her information and her bio and her experience and kind of how she ended up here with us today.
Sure. Well, my background is I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist, and then got advanced training in functional medicine with the Institute of Functional Medicine. And if anybody knows, in general, not just dietitians, but all health professionals, we tend to be trained in a very myopic way. It's more of a tried and true way, safe and sound, very conventional, because that's, it's almost like a safety zone. And if you're ever interested in anything alternative, you really have to learn that on your own. But when I went into nutrition to begin with, I was already interested in the alternative. My thing was wanting to really understand the relationship between mood and food. That, I was about 12, and I was very, very interested in that, mostly because of my mother, who didn't really have the best relationship with food, and she drank an insane amount of coffee. And I'm not against coffee at all, but I am definitely against drinking 15 to 20 cups a day. And, you could see the effect that would have on somebody.
Yes.
And at that time, when I went into nutrition, the option was to major in dietetics. But when I got to school, nobody was talking about food and mood. That just didn't exist. Nobody was thinking there was a relationship. Nobody was talking about that gut-brain connection. So even when I went to graduate school and I thought, I'm going to this graduate school, I went to Columbia, and Columbia was at the time, and maybe it still is now, it was like the Berkeley of the East, where they were very forward thinking. They did not talk about it there either. So, time went on. I never really forgot about it. I was always very intrigued with the Fine Gold diet, which was all about the relationship between artificial ingredients and certain sugars with hyperactivity. Well, lo and behold, fast forward many, many years, and my second live birth, I had twins, and my daughter had a developmental delay, and she had other issues, and people would call them, they would want to call these neurological issues, but they're not neurological issues. It's a whole body issues. It's not just neurological, because things are happening in our gut and other areas of our body, and they seem to be presenting as neurological. So anyway, it was really interesting. There was a conference that was happening nearby not far from my house that was being put on by some occupational therapists who were with the Feingold Association. And my daughter was in occupational therapy and had sensory integration issues. And I thought, oh my goodness, I better investigate this. And that became, she was very young at the time, maybe about 4. And I realized, wait a minute, I already have this training in nutrition. Why aren't I using that? And I always tell people that it was like this aha moment where I felt like I was Dorothy, that I had those red shoes. I had the ability to get home. I had the ability to really help my daughter heal herself, but I didn't know it.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there on, I really hit the ground running. And, I've used many, many different modalities with her, not just nutrition. And some worked, some in fact worked immediately, and some did not. But, I think if you talk to most parents who have the resources, they're going to do whatever they can for their child that isn't going to be dangerous. So, of course, fast forward a few more years, and I knew about what was going on in the medical marijuana world. The big news was always with, Charlotte Figge, who unfortunately we lost last year, and she had, Dravet syndrome, which is a very specific type of seizure disorder that was really ameliorated with, a very specific formulation of cannabis that was very high in CBD, that of course was then named Charlotte's Web. And a lot of people knew her story because Sanjay Gupta did all the specials on CNN. And then I thought, maybe I should look into this for Isabella. Of course, listen, I grew up in Brooklyn. I went to college. I knew what cannabis was. I certainly did not think of it, though, as something that I would be using for my daughter or recommending to anybody else. But after investigating, I realized, wait a minute, this could actually work. And it did. But it worked. My daughter didn't have seizures, but her seizures were ameliorated. And I always want to point this out to people. A lot of people assume that it was cannabis. It was not. It was with food and nutrition. So many, many years ago, when Isabella was about 4, is when I applied, she was on, a modified ketogenic diet. She wasn't in a laboratory setting, and she did not have Dravet's, and she was not having, thank goodness, hundreds of seizures a day. It was fewer than that. So, but it affected her in a different way. Her ability to conceptualize improved. Things I didn't expect. Her attention improved. And I think that's the thing about plant medicine. So I want people to understand that cannabis is plant medicine, is that you often don't know how it's going to impact people. And in fact, you really don't know how any medication, a prescription medication that's made at a pharmaceutical company is going to affect somebody. This is where I always like to point out that if we could, fix seizures, we wouldn't have 27 different anti-epileptic medications. And we know that with each medication that a person takes that they fail, that doesn't work, that the likelihood of the next one working is just goes down and down. So it's all about this, and it's really all about personalized medicine. It's really it's very individualized. So that's then how I got to the point of then saying, wait a minute, I had to investigate this on my own. There was nothing out there. I had no idea what the endocannabinoid system was. I didn't learn that. None of my colleagues knew. That was like, and then when I found out that the endocannabinoid system impacts and interacts with every other system in the body, it obviously becomes another aha moment. Wait a minute. What else is going on with other people? And really, ultimately, you can, for people with chronic disease, it is an endocannabinoid system imbalance. So it became clear that nobody was getting this education. And that's when I and my former business partner decided to put together an education program. And it's the Holistic Cannabis Academy, which is, you can find at holisticcanna.com, for healthcare professionals to really learn about the endocannabinoid system and the plant, and how really to not just use the plant, but really understand the endocannabinoid system. And I think that for people to really understand the value of cannabis, they need to know the existence of the endocannabinoid system and why it's so important.
Mhm.
Awesome. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Laura, you know, really interesting background. I myself have a son that has some challenges, and I've done a lot of holistic things, and so I love this. So I guess one of the things that I want to talk a little bit about is kind of the myth of cannabis, because when you talk about your academy and health professionals, I do think that there's, stigma behind cannabis, and I'm sure it's in the healthcare field as well as it is in kind of everyday lives. Can you talk a little bit about the myths of cannabis and what the reality is?
Sure. I mean, I think I remember the first time I heard the word paradigm shift, or the phrase paradigm shift, and that was like another aha moment. Because if we just think of really simple things in life that people have such a hard time, changing their paradigm for basic things in life. It's very difficult for people to change their ideas. So I want you to think that if you're a doctor, and I'm just going to say doctor because I use this as an example, because doctors spend a lot of money to be educated. It costs a fortune.
Yeah.
They take out loans. Then when they go into practice, they have to pay an exorbitant amount for liability insurance. So now the paradigm is attached to money, right? And I'm not saying in any it's not in a pejorative way, but they've spent a lot of money and now they owe more money. So now they have to make money. Well, now say somebody comes along, and it's somebody like me. I'm not a doctor, I'm a dietitian, and April, you know that when you're a mother who has a child that has a challenge, nobody's going to stop you. We make the tiger moms, they're like kitty cats compared to us, right? And so you have somebody like us come along to say, hey, the multiple medications that you're using, because my daughter was on 3 different meds before I took her off those meds and really healed her with nutrition and other modalities. That doesn't fly well, because now you are really impacting somebody's paradigm and their livelihood. It's sort of insulting. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the first thing, is that we have to take and it is, of course, it's always ego. We have to take the ego out of that. We all have ego. We have to take that out of it. And that is not an easy thing to do. That's a tremendous paradigm shift. Mm-hmm. So now what has to happen, I think we really have to see healthcare professionals, doctors, and every other healthcare professional really need to learn about the endocannabinoid system, because that's going to start reducing that myth that anybody. I mean, I can remember when I was in school, if you smoked a joint on Tuesday, by Friday you were going to be a heroin addict. Crazy association. And I think that remained for a lot of people, that they really, and that still remains with our federal government. I mean, we know that marijuana is in the same Schedule I category with heroin, but cocaine isn't there. It's very fascinating. And so we clearly have a little bit of a way to go. I mean, we've come a long way, because we have more than half the states have approved medical marijuana. And now in this last election, I think, was it 4 or 5 additional states with adult use.
Right.
so there's one of the things, the myths that I know you two agree, April and Emily, because I heard you mention it earlier in our pre-call, Emily. I like to use the word adult use, and most people use rec, and I don't like rec at all, because most people who are using cannabis who don't have a medical marijuana recommendation, and who maybe they're going to an adult use dispensary, or maybe they're not. Most people are using it to impact some sort of a health condition. Now, whether some of them are over consuming, that could yes, I think that is the case.
Yeah.
But they're using it for what? Anxiety, right?
Absolutely.
And now, for those people who may not be using it for anxiety, because we're all, stuck at home, well, there are people who are using it because they don't have the socialization. So that is giving them anxiety.
Yeah.
And so I think so let's consider the fact that most states, when the lockdown occurred in the pandemic, dispensaries were considered essential businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, they were in Massachusetts for sure.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing, because how can that would have been like shutting down a pharmacy and saying, no, you can't get your medicine. True. So I think that is, that hopefully healthcare professionals and consumers are taking a look at that and, rethinking, and I think, unfortunately, a lot of people know somebody or knew someone who consumes a lot of cannabis and is in their mother's basement, playing video games. So they think everybody is like that. And and the reason why they think everybody is like that, because the people who aren't like that, who are professionals, who are doctors and lawyers and teachers and school bus drivers, well, hopefully not when they're driving, and other professions are using cannabis. They're microdosing with it, but they're not coming forward because of the stigma.
Correct.
I mean, there's still a stigma, and I have to tell you that when I went into the field, I was. In the beginning, I was sort of trepidatious on who I was going to tell. Now, obviously, when you write a book called, the CBD Oil Miracle, the cat's sort of out of the bag. So, but it was out of the bag before that. But I didn't know what the reaction, from people was going to be. And I hate to admit it, I was still concerned. And I think that, once people knew what was happening with my daughter, and they knew that, I may have been working with other people and saw their success, they could accept it more. But interestingly, that didn't mean that they were going to use cannabis plant medicine
for themselves.
So we do have a way to go. I mean, Emily, as a community out, obviously you have that job for that very reason.
That's exactly right, Laura. Yes.
You have to get out there. I mean, do you find that it's the same in Massachusetts?
100%. Yeah. Before the pandemic, part of my job would be to go to dispensaries that had the adult use side of things. And I would have my table and I would stand there and I would talk to people that would be in a very long line. And I would try to talk to them about getting their card. And, they just wanted nothing to do with it. They just wanted, I think, buy on the adult use side and then go hide somewhere. And, like you said, they are definitely medicating themselves for, one of the, hundreds and hundreds of ailments out there that it helps. But I think that they just don't want, a lot of them say, I don't want, anyone to know I have a card. I don't want the government to know. I don't want anything to be taken away from me. And, it's a little heartbreaking that that's kind of what the thought process is. And so, my job would be to try to dispel it. But, ultimately, we still see a lot of long lines in those adult use dispensaries. So, I completely agree with you, everything you're saying.
And, I think one of the things too is that, as we talked about kind of pre-show, is MedWell Unscripted was to really educate the community and talk to people and educators like you, Laura, because there is still that stigma even in today's mindset, although we've come
Absolutely.
still have a long way to go.
Yeah, for sure. Can you give us an update on how Isabella is today?
Sure. Well, she just left the house. Let's see, what time is it? A couple of hours ago to go to her job. So she works 2 days a week at a supermarket, and pre-pandemic, she worked 4 days a week, but a supermarket, obviously a lot of people come in. So she works in the morning when there's fewer people. She participates in equestrian. So she has 2 days a week, she takes lessons and also does something called equine therapy, which is wonderful. And so that's that's on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then another 2 days a week, she participates in a program, which she used to go to. Of course, everything is online. And she also has a tutor, because, we never stop learning. And one of the challenges with, and this is in every state, it's really, and we know this from, you certainly know this from being in the marijuana business, that every state is different and every state looks at things differently. Well, every state does a lot of things differently. So the way monies get divvied up in, for when a person with a disability ages, it's called aging out of the educational system, which in Massachusetts actually happens at 22. But in New Jersey and Connecticut, it happens at 21. And once you age out, then you have to, it's not an entitlement anymore. You have to show eligibility for different programming. And it's just fascinating to me. Then at that point, there's like, you have to seek out the education on your own.
Right.
It's so that is very frustrating, but she's doing great.
Wonderful.
She tells me regularly that she loves her life. But I do know that it has been very difficult for her not seeing people, because she's a social animal.
Yeah.
And so, she does everything online. She just had a dance party online.
That's great.
You're dancing in your room on your own, which of course we all did, but that's just you now and people seeing you. And, she has another girls' night out or ladies' night out or whatever it's called that she has on Monday nights that she does, which she loves. But of course, it's not, as we know, it's not the same as being online. Like if the three of us were together, right? If you normally had a studio and we went into a studio, we'd get to know each other. We'd probably have lunch together. We'd learn more things about. It's so much better. And I think for somebody, so Isabella is a perfect example of somebody who she actually did not have significant social anxiety. She had some, but now I think the anxiety that she has from isolation is worse than the social anxiety. Right. And I actually think that this is what we're seeing. And, I'm not, COVID, of course, has been terrible. And we have a big impact with people getting sick, and we don't know the sequelae of what's going to happen down the road, and obviously people dying. But I think in toto, the impact of COVID with the isolation is actually worse. I agree. And that's why we've seen there's been an increase in the dispensaries are doing fine. Right. I mean, have you seen an uptick in in certifications in various states?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I think people are now really putting themselves out there to obtain their medical card to get help for a lot of it, like you mentioned, is the anxiety. and a lot of insomnia and,
Yes.
you know, what you would find when you're in a very stressful situation like the pandemic that we're in, for sure.
Yes.
The other thing is we're lucky in the sense that in Massachusetts and in Florida, we can offer telemedication appointments, right? So
Right.
appointments have really been peace of mind for so many, you know.
Absolutely.
And in Massachusetts, our dispensaries can deliver for locally for medical marijuana certification.
Yeah, so people can stay safe. Yeah, that's been helpful.
Oh yeah, that is fantastic. I mean, you think about people who, if they're supposed to be isolating, then what would be the point of coming out? Or people who are extremely ill.
Yeah.
Yeah, I that's great. I mean, I think some states have really thought things through, but let's think, for instance, one of the examples. We know that the endocannabinoid system something is definitely going wrong with autism spectrum disorder. Yet, most states, the states who have, who are condition dependent for getting, which are almost all of them, for a medical marijuana recommendation, most of them don't have autism as an indication. So that means that, a lot of the mothers who are very clever need to sort of backdoor getting the card, whether it's, if the child has a seizure disorder, well, that's easy because I believe every state has an indication for seizures. Some states have indications now for anxiety, so that's great.
Right.
So, but that's sort of an example of how still with the states that have medical marijuana regulations in place, it's still been very difficult for people to access the program. And Emily, what you talk about with people not wanting the government to know they have a card, what I say to people is, well, wouldn't you rather have the medical marijuana card so now you have a bona fide reason to use cannabis? So if something happens at your job or whatever, because unless the state has also decriminalized, which these things are not going hand in hand. There's a lag for states. So there's still a lot we have to do. And if we just think about something really that this is one of my biggest pet peeves in cannabis, where people talk about CBD not being psychoactive. Well, so we've made the term psychoactive to be a bad word. Yet everybody knows that caffeine is psychoactive. And nobody thinks it's a bad thing, right? It's literally the way, I don't know what the statistic is, but it's certainly very high, no pun intended, of the people who start their morning, they need to jumpstart their morning with caffeine in the format of coffee or tea, right? And they know it's psychoactive, they know it impacts them. They even know things like chocolate are psychoactive. Yet I don't know why. And even some of the companies that make hemp-derived CBD will say that their product is non-psychoactive. Well, then I am not interested in working with those companies, and they really don't understand the plant. The reason why CBD works is because it is psychoactive. But at the same time, and I talk about this a lot in my book, the CBD oil miracle, I don't want to ever throw out the baby with the bathwater. So there are many, many cases where hemp-derived CBD isn't going to cut it. You still need to be using, the real, full whole plant. You need to be using the plant that has THC in it. I think where there's a concern is that a lot of the dispensaries or the growers are growing plants with very, very high THC. So, and that started happening in the 70s, where the way the plant was originally made by Mother Earth was much lower in THC. It wasn't 30%. So now you have this super high amount of THC, and it can, so people really they really need guidance on, what cultivar, better known in the vernacular as strain, to use. and how much of it. And really the way to go for most people is microdosing.
Yeah.
But, we live in a country where macro is the best thing,
More. Mm-hmm. Yeah. More and more.
Macro everything. So, even when I think about the first time I went to Italy and I saw how you do not see any overweight Italians. They do eat pasta every day, but the pasta portion is tiny. It's not like what gets served here. So in this country, we got all this macro stuff, right?
Yeah.
We're not talking about microdosing, but people have to learn how to microdose, because if you are using too much cannabis, what happens? Your receptors shut down.
Right. And you use a term, Laura, that at MedWell here we use a ton as well, where it's low and slow.
Yes.
And so, especially for those folks that are just calling us for the first time and they're all anxious about even picking up the phone to even make the appointment, and they're asking questions, that is the same exact advice that, we give on our end as well. It's such a great thing to be able to make sure you're saying that. And I know with the dispensaries that I work with, they all have that same language too. And I think that's a really important thing to tell folks, that we don't want to start with this large dose when we get home from buying, our products for the first time.
For sure.
So Laura, let's talk about your book. I know, I'm loving this conversation, so informative, but we definitely want to share about the book, the CBD Oil Miracle. So can you tell us a little bit about it, and kind of, you told us your story about your daughter and how that led into kind of writing the book and what it's about.
So, I think we all know that in 2018, CBD, hemp-derived CBD hit the media like nothing we've ever seen.
Yeah.
And what I often liken it to is fish oil. And if you guys can remember years ago, right? Fish oil was the big thing. Mm-hmm. Also an anti-inflammatory. CBD is the ultimate anti-inflammatory. And in fact, the government has a patent on CBD as an anti-inflammatory. So I like to say they're placing bets everywhere. So here we have this product that just hit the market. The number of companies that we have now marketing CBD, I'm sure, I don't know, what is 5,000 CBD products on the market? Maybe not 5,000 companies, but 5,000, it's everywhere. And we have to think about, do we want to be buying CBD at the mini mart at the gas station? Do you want to be buying it at the liquor store? Do you want to be buying it at even a hair salon? We had to think about, I've never seen anything like this. Fish oil was never sold in a liquor store. So, I think we need to step back. And that was the purpose of the book, was really to look at CBD. The title of the book was not my idea, but CBD, I don't see that it in and of itself is a miracle. I think that how it can help certain people can be pretty miraculous. And I'll give you an example. People who have often fibromyalgia, migraine, some gastrointestinal disorders like Crohn's, and in fact, those three health issues or comorbidities. And Ethan Russo, who came out with the idea of looking at the plant as the entourage effect as well as an endocannabinoid deficiency, what he did was he took the information from plant medicine. All plants have an entourage effect, not just cannabis. So as a dietitian, when I look at food as medicine, I'm looking at the whole food, right? The whole plant. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't recommend supplements, but we know that the plant has hundreds of different chemical constituents that work together. So that's how we're looking at cannabis, right? Cannabis has all these different cannabinoids, and CBD is one, right? THC is another. There's another 100 100 plus cannabinoids.
Sure.
THC and CBD are cannabinoids. Then there's terpenes. There's other plant constituents. So we know that all of these things work together. So that's why a lot of healthcare professionals don't really like any of the isolate products. Now, I'm not saying that they don't have a place. I think for people who may work for the federal government, they cannot risk having a product that has any THC in it, so they have to use a CBD isolate, or like an athlete who might lose the scholarship. So there is a place for that, but often for most people, they're looking at, a whole plant or full spectrum or broad spectrum product to get, all of the products. And that's really what I wanted to talk about in the book, The CBD Oil Miracle. And as I said, I don't like to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So even though the book is primarily about CBD, and I know you guys have read it, thank you. It's really about more than just CBD. It's really about the whole plant. And so the first part of the book really talks about the endocannabinoid system, issues like this. And then the second part of the book, I believe there are 32 chapters with 32 different health conditions. And I say in the chapter whether or not maybe CBD doesn't work. And in certain cases, like for cancer, you really got to stay with conventional. You shouldn't be jumping to medical marijuana, and you definitely have to be working with a practitioner who works with both. And because there's like 100, and I don't know what the exact number is, but there's over 100 different types of cancers. So you can't say across the board. But I do know that, I know a young girl who has a glioblastoma, and generally when you get a glioblastoma, you die. And she is still alive, but she's using both. She's using both, medical marijuana and, conventional therapy. Maybe, I don't know the ins and outs of her treatment, but it's probably, lower. So the book was really to address not just CBD, but really the whole plant. Right. And the endocannabinoid system.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was interesting when you referenced all of the different, ailments like Alzheimer's and things like that, of how it can really help. And I think one of the things, going back to something you said earlier about autism, a lot of states don't recognize that certain things as being able to get an MMJ card. And I loved when you were talking about moms being creative, because that clearly is something that moms that have children with special needs can be creative. Right. Talk a little bit about kind of the effects of how CBD can ease other ailments. I know that you're not a doctor, and I know that, but I think from an education perspective, if you could share a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think the area where CBD, I believe, can be the most helpful, and is anxiety, is quelling anxiety. And if you really understand how CBD works, so to use a term that most people don't know, allosterically means it works outside of the endocannabinoid system. It doesn't work directly with the receptors. What it does is it affects the enzyme systems. So it's an indirect. It's an indirect impact, but it affects our whole serotonin and dopamine pathway. So once you really understand that, you can see how CBD can be relaxing. Now, does it work for everyone? No, because some people have a different genetic predisposition where it does not work. And you also really need to be very careful if you're on certain medications. Now, the general rule of thumb is that if you have a medication that interacts with grapefruit, that CBD is contraindicated, that it's not a good idea to use. But, these are things that you need to ask your prescribing doctor. Now, sometimes, my experience sometimes with physicians and other healthcare professionals, this is not a good one, is that if they don't know, they just say no. Right off the bat. You have to ask. And what I always bring this study in, bring my book in, you know, you have to do your own work. I think that the days of turning over our health to somebody else in a 7-minute appointment are over.
I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't really that long ago that we took care of our own health, right? Every family had their own little medicinal closet, and I can assure you it was full of plants. And not that long ago, one of those plants would have been cannabis that was in that medicine chest, so to speak. So we have to take that back. People have to stop thinking that the way to get well is to just go to see somebody and get a prescription. So that's why I'm a big proponent of integrating cannabis with other modalities. So the teaching that I do in the Holistic Cannabis Academy, which is at holisticcanna.com, is really about integrating cannabis with other modalities. Obviously, my favorite is nutrition. And we have to remember that we feed the cells of our body through food and nutrition. So that's really important. And many other modalities. I mean, we have to, everybody knows the term, thinks about, oh, there's a bad vibe in here, right? When you go into a room or you're with somebody. Well, that's because the energy vibration is off. And maybe, we can think of toxic relationships. That's also going to affect your health. So there's, nutrition, energy medicine, yoga, aromatherapy. Aromatherapy, of course, is going to work very well with cannabis because cannabis has terpenes, in it. So aromatherapy is going to work very well. So I'm a big proponent, and I talk about that in the book. You definitely, I'm not a proponent of just saying, okay, just use cannabis. I want people also to change their lifestyle. That's important too.
Sure.
Laura, you mentioned too that, people shouldn't really be purchasing their CBD at the beauty salon or the gas station or the liquor store. So when I'm sure you get this question all the time, people must come up to you and say, well, then where should I go? What normally would be the answer that you would give to someone asking about that?
Well, I mean, I think I know every dispensary in every state is different. Certainly if you only want hemp derived, I don't know. I think there are some dispensaries that do sell hemp derived CBD. I think that would be a great place to go. I think healthcare professionals. I mean, I have CBD in my own, dispensary where I also sell supplements, but you can, from a healthcare professional, would be a great place to go, or at least get advice from a healthcare professional who has training in cannabis education. I think there are a lot of really great hemp derived CBD companies out there, like Fantastic. I have worked with many of them. And I also think there's a lot of not good ones. Like, for instance, I live in an urban area. There is a store across the street from me that's great. This guy does a lot of research and clearly on the people who buy in the area. So, he's got coconut milk, he's got gluten-free bread, he's got all sorts of things. Well, he also sells these bottles. I'm not going to say the name. He sells some hemp-derived CBD, which I seriously doubt if there's any CBD in there. It's $19.99 for 1 ounce.
Wow.
Now, and there's no way there can be CBD in there. What is there, 1 gram? So, because typically, a 1 ounce bottle of CBD, and let's say it has, 500 milligrams, not one gram would have been too much, 500 milligrams of CBD, that's going to be at least $50. If it has way more than that, the price is just going to go up and up.
Right.
So, and the other thing people need to, I think there's confusion about too, hemp is also a great food. It's one of, as a nutritionist, it's one of my favorites, but hemp food comes from the seed of the plant. CBD and all the cannabinoids come from the aerial part of the plant, mostly the bud of the plant, but the food comes from the aerial part of the plant. So that's where you're getting you can also get hemp oil, which is different. So hemp oil that you can find in the store is used mostly for salad. You really should not heat it. It has a pretty low smoking point. So, and it has a really nice nutty flavor. And then there's hemp seeds, there's hemp powder, there's hemp milk. It's like the most fantastic vegan source of protein. So, but that's different than the 1 ounce that they're selling as a CBD oil.
You might have to write a new book with recipes. So we've mentioned the Holistic Cannabis Academy a few times, and I know it's for wellness healthcare professionals. Can you just talk a little bit more about detail about what the academy is? So I know we do have some healthcare people in our audience, so I'd love to just let them know a little bit more about it.
Sure. So it is an online learning platform that you could do at your own pace about integrating cannabis with other modalities. So there's a lot of instruction on what the endocannabinoid system, also instruction about the plant, Ayurvedic properties of the plant, for people who are interested in that. And about integrating cannabis with other modalities, and also talking about the conditions for which it is can be appropriate. And there's an exam, so there is a certification, and for certain practitioners you can get CE credits. And what I'm going to do, but this won't be available, I don't think, until tomorrow. We'll use the code MedWell for a discount on the program, so people can get a discount if they're interested. And certainly, if anybody has questions, they can email me at laura@lauralagano.com if you have questions about the program. But different people have taken it. So doctors, nurses, dietitians, aromatherapists, and also caretakers. And, there have been consumers. I mean, for a consumer who really wants to take charge of his or her health,
Right.
They may take the program or pieces of it.
Wow,
that's great.
Laura, what's next for you on the horizon? I know you have lots of happenings and tools under your tool chest. So what's next for you?
Well, for me, I think that I can really impact the canophobia, fear of cannabis. I wrote an article for the Huffington Post, I think in 2015, about canophobia, but I really think I can affect canophobia most by continuing my work as a communicator and educator. So I'm really, the work that I'm doing is really working with other companies as a consultant. So somebody like MedWell might hire me, or a dispensary, or a hemp-derived CBD company, to really help them with their education. Whether it's to help them, like what you do, Emily, is in outreach. In fact, I'm right. We're in. I think it's the third round of applications for dispensaries in New Jersey, and I know I'm on some of the dispensary applications as the community outreach person.
Oh, that's great.
So doing something like that, working with companies to really get them to understand how to educate and how to reach people, because you know what, and I know we're running a little out of time, but I thought this was really interesting. I was talking to a hemp-derived CBD company recently, and they had a product, and they told me who they thought their target audience was. I said to them, I know who your target audience is. And I told them, and they said, oh, wow, that is who it was. So, because I have worked in education, also because I am a healthcare professional, I speak at a lot of meetings, both cannabis meetings and non-cannabis meetings. So I speak at, nutrition meetings, personalized medicine meeting, other meetings. I spoke at the American Oil Chemist Society meeting. I just got asked to speak at a digestive disease meeting in Japan.
Although I get to travel there.
I know. It's later. So you really have to be getting the word out because, again, as I said earlier, we, the three of us, are in this bubble, and everybody we know and talk to is all on board, but the bubble is a little small.
It is.
Agreed.
So we still have a lot of work to do.
We do.
Wow. Laura, what a great way to start the new year. Thank you so much. I could listen to you for hours.
I could too.
This was amazing.
I hope all our viewers check your book out, Laura, because I have to say from reading it, I just loved it. I learned so much, and I think people will really just be blown away by how much CBD could help with so many ailments out there. So I hope our viewers do check that out for sure.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So again, friends, if you are catching the replay, please do leave a comment or a question. We're happy to get back to you. And thank you so much for attending today and watching and learning all about CBD and its greatness. I do want to address one last thing that we've had a lot of questions come up with, especially in our Massachusetts area where the capacity has changed again to 25%, including offices. We still are open for office appointments. We're clearly following all the guidelines, but we do offer telemedicine appointments. So please do know that your recertifications, you still can get those on time and get the medication that you need for your wellness. So go to our website at medwellhealth.net. And we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks on MedWell Unscripted. Thanks so much for watching, and make it a great day. Happy New Year, friends.
Ciao.